This is Fitchburg State University, a small low-level school located in the great state of Massachusetts. It is mostly known for its nursing, film, and theater programs, but a lot of people do recognize the Fitchburg Falcons for having the worst football team in all of college football. And today, we will be rebuilding this program back to and beyond what it once was. But in order to understand how exactly this is the worst team in the NCAA, I'm going to have to take you guys back to 2015, which is the last time that Fitchburg State actually had a winning record. And sitting at 8-3 on the season, they were definitely one of, if not the best team in the conference. They had a quarterback, Garrett Delicate, who actually went on to play professional football overseas. They also recruited quite a few weapons on the outside from out of state, who turned out to make a lot bigger impact on the program than expected. Plus, they had a tight end named Devin Samil who would go down as the greatest receiver in the history of Fitchburg State. The team already had more than everything it needed on offense to become a successful program. But they also had this one dude on defense named Malcolm Brown Simpson. And that dude was, he was definitely a problem for the opposing offenses, to say the least. And the crazy thing about it is that he actually had a brother on the team who was also the starting running back. And it was safe to say you did not want to get in this dude's way, bro, because he was really going to hit you with that shablaka and keep running past you like it was no problem. So it was no surprise to many that this team would go on to dominate throughout the majority of their season. It's just too bad that when it came time for the playoffs, the season would ultimately end because the kicker could not put it through the uprights, ultimately putting an end to one of the best seasons in Fitchburg State football history. And unfortunately, many of the players who stuck around would have no idea that this will be the best season Fitchburg State has in a while. Which brings us to 2017, where a young freshman GManski has arrived on campus. And although the team had retained and added quite a lot of new talent, one of the things that this team specifically was looking for was finding a new quarterback. Because after Garrett Delicate had left to play overseas, the Falcons were now stuck with four options. There was Nelson Valerio. He had battled injuries throughout his career, but he had been a starter before and was capable of still being one. Then we had senior Jimmy Antonelli, who was pretty good, but definitely inconsistent. Then we had this one dude, Connor Fitzsimmons, who was personally my favorite. But I would be lying if I said he didn't sometimes have a tendency to not see people over the middle. Yeah, man, sometimes they called him Fitzpick. Oh yeah, and we did have this kid named Desmond Leslie, who in my opinion, he was definitely the most talented, but like me, he was just a freshman. But coming off a season where the team was 5-5, we were going into this new season trying to get the team back to a winning record. And early on in the year, it definitely looked like we were going to do that. We had talent all over the place. And when we even had this one dude at kick return named Justin Jean Charles, yeah, nah, he was real fast, bro. That was my old roommate. Back then, the team had a saying called one brick, which basically meant that if we stack up good plays, we'll eventually stack up good drives and ultimately stack up good wins. In a few games in, this team was so bought in that we had our backups going out there scoring touchdowns. And it was hard not to think that we were on the right track the way that we were taking care of business. We were able to come away with a couple W's early on in the season, mostly led by a plethora of talented upperclassmen. But then things would begin to change when against Framingham State, our quarterback Nelson Valerio got injured. And little did they know that a never-ending quarterback carousel was about to begin, because Jimmy Antonelli went out there and threw so many interceptions that one of the defenders on Framingham State actually made it on ESPN. And from there, it seemed like our season just went into a free fall. So eventually they started rotating quarterbacks, and although Connor Fitzsimmons was actually pretty good at times, well, there was a reason why they called him Fitzpick. And ultimately, this Fitchburg State program would regress from the year that they had previously, as we went on to have a 3-7 record. And I think partially because we were so ass, our longtime head coach Pat Haverty decided to dip out, and along with him went a lot of the great talent that he had cultivated over the past few years, and a few of them actually had an opportunity to play professionally. So they went on to hire this new guy Goofy McGuire or McGee or whatever, and one of the challenges that he faced was that he was not able to get a lot of good recruits. And I'm not gonna lie, man, that definitely worried a young GManski who was now starting as a sophomore. And although I would eventually have to leave the team to pursue career opportunities, I still truly believe that this team was going to be pretty good, especially considering that they recruited a new quarterback out of Florida. And although he was actually really good for a freshman, there wasn't much he can do about the lack of talent around the team. And at this point, the Fitchburg State football program was completely in shambles, as they would finish the 2018 season 2-8, and their 2019 season wasn't at all better. So in 2020, the athletic director decided to hire this one dude named Scott Sperone. And I'm not even gonna lie to you guys, this coach is the worst coach I've ever had. This stupid, goofy, donkey-faced looking dumbass said, hey, you know what, y'all? I know our offensive line is horrible, so you know what we're gonna do? Let's run a triple option. And my God, I wish I was joking. Many players like me knew before the year even started that the season was over. But little did we know just how bad it was gonna be. Because although we had some pretty good players on defense, we definitely did not have enough. And we did not make it easier for them considering that the offense was going 3 and out almost every single possession. And it definitely didn't help when we were playing against some certified demons on the other team, as we would go on to get blown out in almost every single game. It would actually be a pretty big deal if we scored points. It got to the point where I single-handedly had to show the coaches that we need to throw the ball, as I went out there and I had multiple big receptions downfield, getting us past the 50 twice for the first time in multiple weeks, and proving to the coaches that there was definitely a better way of running the offense than a fucking triple option. With that being said though, we still went on to have the worst season in the history of Fitchburg State, marking the first year that we were actually ranked dead last in all of college football. And at this point, man, the program is worse than in shambles. I mean, it's catastrophically down bad. There were not many players who wanted to stay and be a part of this team. And after the following year where they managed to go 1-9, the school finally decided to smarten up and fire Scott Sperone. And not just because he didn't know what he was doing as a football coach, but because oftentimes he was a piece of shit. And there were not a lot of guys who wanted to play for him. But for the longest time now, it seemed like there was nothing this program can do to get back to what it was, as they would have another 0-10 season, followed by another 2-8 season. And out of every team in all of college football, they are consistently ranked as one of, if not the worst team in all of the NCAA. Which brings us to today, where the Fitchburg Falcons are hiring a new head coach, where Black Man McGee the 11th is coming in and he's ready to lead this team to greatness. And at this point, man, he knows he has to start a whole new culture, bro. If you do not want to be here, if you don't want to be recruited here, then get off the board, get out of here. He wants to find players who are going to be bought into what he's going to bring to this program, but he'll have to worry about all that later on because he has to figure out who he has here right now. And luckily, it does look like he has a quarterback, with Rocky Marchitelli looking like he's going to be the guy to lead this offense. He'll have a couple weapons to throw to with Sahir Gomez and Jeremy Alec. They also have a very good running back, Matt McTire, who seemed to have benefited from the triple option system. But as far as defense right now, our best players are Derek Prack at linebacker, and it seems like we have a pretty good freshman coming in at safety named Daniel Lira. And of course, Black Man McGee the 11th wasted no time getting his team prepared for the schedule. And he told the team that the goal for the season was to get us back to having a winning record. But Black Man knows that it's going to be tough, especially starting the first game of the season against one of the best teams in the conference, as the Falcons are now set to match up against Worcester State. Now to start the season off, this Fitchburg Falcons defense was looking good at first, bringing Worcester to a 3rd down and 18, where one of the Fitchburg defenders flies way too far upfield and they get caught lacking over the top. And all of a sudden this crowd feels like it might be more of the same from the previous years, as Worcester scores an easy touchdown on their opening drive of the season. But now that this offense wasn't sitting here running a triple option anymore, that had actually opened up a lot of opportunities as they were able to move downfield on their opening drive. They would get to this 3rd down where they would eventually get stopped short of the first. But at least they were putting points up on the board early and they felt great going forward throughout the rest of the game. And with this offense coming out here and surprisingly playing pretty well, the momentum would completely swing when somebody on defense said, "Wang," coming up with the turnover. And now the Falcons look like they got some energy. They come out here on offense and get to this 3rd down and 14, where quarterback Rocky Marchitelli throws a great pass. And no, I don't know why I said it like that, but that was a great pass though. They got to another 3rd down where once again they did get stopped, resulting in another 3 points for the offense. And unfortunately, with the defense not able to force a turnover on the next drive, Worcester State would eventually go on to score a touchdown, extending their lead now to 8 as they're trying to close out the first half. But senior quarterback Rocky Marchitelli's out there trying to do his best to keep his team in the game, coming up with a big scramble that gets his team inside goal-to-goal territory. And with under 30 seconds left before halftime, he ends up finding a man open in the end zone, hitting tight end Andrew Campiglio for a touchdown, the first one of the season for the Falcons, and things were looking great for them as they would eventually tie this game up. But then out of nowhere, things would change, as Rocky Marchitelli ends up throwing a very bad pick, allowing Worcester to take it all the way back to the crib for 6, giving them the lead and seemingly a lot of momentum going forward. As by the 4th quarter, they were still down in this game, and Rocky Marchitelli goes on to throw another pick, as he tried to target his number 1 receiver for the game-tying score. But ultimately, this turnover would go on to give Fitchburg State their first loss of the season. And a lot of the fans feel like they might go through another year of their team being trash. But I'm not going to lie to y'all, man, that's not how Black Man McGee the 11th feels, as he saw a lot of good in what the team was able to accomplish today. And there were some high school players around the country who also noticed that this team was heading in the right direction. But Black Man McGee the 11th was going to have to get his team to prove that. And they now had a chance to get a victory against one of the worst teams in the conference, as Fitchburg State was now heading on the road to face off against Castleton. Now early on in this one, there were some players who were ready to make a play. The freshman Daniel Lira did a great job seeing a route come over the middle, so he ran right up to that ball carrier and he said, "Wang," as he knocks this ball loose, and the strong safety is over there ready to pick it up. And forcing a turnover early on seemed like it was going to give Fitchburg State a ton of momentum, until Marchitelli went out there and threw another pick on his season. And all of a sudden, the momentum that Fitchburg thought they had immediately flipped to the other side, because the moment Castleton got the ball back, the defense had turned so bad that they were tackling their own teammates, and they let the Castleton running back pretty easily make his way towards the end zone for a touchdown. So it wasn't a great way to start this game, as soon Fitchburg State would find themselves down by 10. But it wasn't like this team was just going to give up, as Rocky went out there and found tight end Andrew Campiglio for a nice gain, moving the chains on third down. And on this drive, these two seem like they're building a connection, as another pass would find its way towards Campiglio for a first down to bring it to 1st and goal, ultimately setting up a handoff to the running back where he plunged his way across for a touchdown. A big play that had Fitchburg State feeling like they were about to get back into this game. But soon they would realize that that would actually be one of the only times they get past the 50, as throughout the rest of this game, this offense was getting completely shut down. And ultimately, Fitchburg would go on to drop their second game of the year, getting blown out by 30 in the process, and at this point it definitely feels like they're in for another long season. But once again, it was hard for Blackman McGee to not feel good about what he saw today. I mean, somehow his entire receiving core was able to get involved, and he realized that maybe he has to get deeper into his passing game to help get the best out of his guys. So it wasn't surprising that he would start getting some running backs who did not want to be part of the team anymore, knowing full well that the Falcons were about to go into a full air raid offense. But now sitting at 0-2 on the season, Blackman McGee the 11th feels real good about his chances going into the next game, as he is about to lead the Falcons into a game against one of the other worst teams in the country, the UGF Pandas. Now early on in this game at home, this Fitchburg crowd was rocking, and it was hard not to when your defense was playing the way it was, just to be followed by the offense as they came out here and made a big play downfield, as Rocky Marchitelli was delivering a dime for a first down. You see, a lot of people like Rocky because not only was he mobile, but he was out there willing to make some big throws. Sometimes, though, those throws would definitely be a little risky, as he throws a pick on his team's opening drive and giving the Pandas all their momentum back. Fortunately, though, UGF was not able to do anything with it, as they got stopped on third down, giving the ball back to the Falcons, and allowed them a chance to start moving their way back downfield as Rocky finds Andrew Campiglio for a first down. This turned out to be a huge play that would ultimately lead the Falcons to a 4th and goal, where a direct snap to Mac McTire gets them across for an easy touchdown, putting them up by a score in the first half, and the entire crowd feels like this game might be a little different. And throughout the second quarter, it definitely seemed like it was, as Rocky and Andrew continued to cultivate their connection. These two were able to get the team right back down towards the goal line, where on 1st and goal, Rocky was using his legs to extend the play before eventually finding Jeremy Alec for a touchdown, a score that has not only given the Falcons their first lead, but their first 2-possession lead of the season. And by the end of half, they would actually get another chance to extend it, as they brought their female kicker Linnea out for a field goal. And it turns out that she would drill this kick through the uprights. The vibes in this game just felt different for the Falcons, and that would be made very clear by the 4th quarter, as Rocky Marchitelli was out there doing a great job using his legs to extend another play, as he went on to throw another pass to Andrew Campiglio, finding him in the end zone for a touchdown that not only extends the lead for the Falcons, but does enough to finally give them their first win of the season, as Fitchburg State would go on to win 26-9, getting their first dub of the year in a game led by Rocky Marchitelli. He almost threw for 300 yards, which hasn't been done here in a while, but that would be made easy by his tight end, who as a sophomore seems like he's already on track to become one of the next great receivers for Fitchburg. And it looks like he and Sahir Gomez were going to be two of the leaders in that department going forward throughout the year. And that definitely excited Blackman McGee the 11th to know that he had some playmakers on the outside. But he knew that this team was a long ways away of fulfilling their goal of having a winning record. And if they wanted to have any chance of doing so, they were going to have to start stringing some wins together. But it was definitely going to be hard to do, as in their next game, they were heading back on the road to face off against FIU. Now Fitchburg had started this game out with a field goal, but FIU was about to start their game out with a touchdown. As I don't know how, but this secondary gets cooked like some shrimp fried rice. Then all of a sudden the Falcons are down 7-3. Soon though, Rocky Marchitelli and Sahir Gomez will start making some big connections, as he not only finds him down the sideline on a play to pick up a first down, but on the very next play, Rocky would end up throwing a dime downfield, and he would hit Sahir Gomez for a touchdown, putting up a score that not only gives the Falcons the lead, but now it seems like the momentum was on the Falcons' side, as Fitchburg ended up getting back-to-back sacks on FIU to force a punt, eventually leading to Rocky throwing another touchdown to Sahir Gomez, extending the Falcons' lead to now 2 possessions in the second quarter, where towards the end of it, the Falcons on defense also came up with another stop, holding them to a field goal before half, and as soon as they got the ball back in the third quarter, Rocky would find Jeremy Alec getting wide open over the top, as he came up with a big play that brought the team down to the goal line, bringing them to the second down and goal where Rocky was trying his best to keep this play alive. And ultimately, he was able to make his way down the right side for a touchdown, putting up a score that extends the Falcon lead back to multiple possessions. And it turns out this score would actually be enough to give the Falcons their second win of the year, as Fitchburg closes this game out 31-10, led by an excellent performance from their senior quarterback with 4 touchdowns. And we definitely had some great performers on this offense. But on defense, we would actually get a player of the week, as Hugh Ebby got 2 sacks and 3 tackles for loss, helping to lead the Falcons to a 2-2 record on the season. And at this point, this team's feeling good about potentially making their way above 500. It would be the first time in over 10 years where that would be the case past week 1. But in order to accomplish that, they would now have to go back on the road, as they were set to face off against Northern Illinois. Early on in this game, the Falcons were looking good, as a nickel blitz sent the Northern Illinois opening drive packing. And on offense, Fitchburg State did a great job finding a way to move themselves past midfield. They got to this third down where it looks like they were about to put some points up, but Rocky would throw a pick. And this one was going all the way back to the crib for a touchdown, as Northern Illinois would now take the lead. Now Rocky was very determined to make up for that. And eventually he did a great job of doing that as he scrambled out of the pocket and found his way across the goal line, getting in for a score that would tie this game up. And then they would get the ball back down by 3 before he threw a hitch route to Jeremy Alec. And all he had to do was just turn it upfield before he was breaking free. With no safety help over the top, there was nobody who was going to catch him, as he got Fitchburg State over the goal line for a touchdown to give them now the lead. And they would continue to maintain it even in the fourth quarter thanks to their kicker Linnea, who just barely drilled this long field goal to put the Falcons up by 3. Soon though, even with this Falcons defense playing very well, Northern Illinois would start gaining a lot of momentum, as they were coming up with some pretty crazy plays. And even though they would go out there and actually miss a big opportunity, they would find a way to take it right back as they caught a pick from Rocky Marchitelli, ultimately leading to them scoring a touchdown with less than a minute left in the game, leaving the Falcons with a last-second Hail Mary attempt to potentially tie, but this pass falls incomplete, and the Falcons lose another game, as they would fall in this one 27-20, and unfortunately this was one where mistakes down the stretch definitely cost them. But it did not just cost them this game, because it also seemed like it cost them to miss out on recruits to conference rivals. But it was all good though, because Fitchburg knew that they did not play a bad game, and soon they might be able to get back on track. Hopefully it'll be in their next game at home against UTSA. Now in this game, the Falcons busted out their brand new all-black jerseys, and early on in this one, it looked like they definitely deserved to be wearing it, as they had continuously come up with big plays leading to scores. Rocky Marchitelli was out there wheeling and dealing and feeling whatever the hell he wanted all over this UTSA defense. He got to this 1st and 15 where he would eventually go out there and launch the ball up in the air, eventually making it over the top to Andrew Campiglio for a touchdown. A huge play that would ignite this crowd. And with that UTSA offense not doing a great job putting up points, it turns out that this score would already be enough to put this game away, as Fitchburg would go on to win this game 30-14. And it was really just an all-around game from the offense and defense that now allows them to be sitting at 3-3 on the season, where it looks like they would now have another opportunity to get themselves above 500. And it may not be too difficult considering they are playing a team that also struggled a lot throughout the past few years, as they traveled on the road to now face off against Texas State. Now one of the more underrated players throughout the country was Sahir Gomez. This kid was consistently getting open, and when he got the ball, he was oftentimes doing a great job of making a big play after the catch. And after this play, he is already over 500 yards on the season. Unfortunately, an incredible play would ultimately be ruined by a bad interception by Rocky, as he throws a turnover that takes some points off the board for the Falcons, and soon Texas State was making their way across the goal line for a touchdown, taking the lead in this game early on. Now the lead looked like it would not actually last long, as Rocky would end up finding a man down the seam for a touchdown, hitting his running back in the end zone as they would now tie this game up. But unfortunately on defense, the Falcons looked like they were no match for this Texas State running back. They were making this dude look like he was Barry Sanders, and he helped have Texas State up by multiple possessions in this second quarter. But you know what, man, one thing about this Fitchburg State team led by Black Man McGee the 11th is that these dudes would come out here and play with some heart. Rocky Marchitelli was out here finding guys open, and they would just barely get the team across the goal line for a score. And in the second half, with the help of guys like Sahir Gomez, who took this pop pass and turned it into a big play for the Falcons, they would ultimately be set up in the red zone on this 3rd down and inches, where Rocky Marchitelli was once again using his legs to extend the play and eventually find a man in the end zone for a score, putting up some points that are now giving the Falcons the chance to take the lead in this game. And all of a sudden, it looked like all the momentum was on their side until Texas State went out there and scored a touchdown, taking the lead right back. And now later on, the Falcons would have a chance to take the lead back on a drive in the 4th quarter. And it looks like they're about to score on a big play from Matt McTire, who brings him down to the goal line. Even fans in the Texas State crowd felt like they were about to take the lead until Rocky throws a pick, one that would not only turn the ball over for the Falcons, but would actually go all the way to the crib for a touchdown, giving Texas State the lead here in the fourth quarter, and sadly this was enough to put this game away, as Fitchburg State was going under 500 and losing another game on their season, dropping this one 37-22. But despite the loss, the silver lining would be that Sahir Gomez went for over 100 yards on the day. And we actually had a player on defense, Austin Tobin, go on to win Player of the Week. So at least Black Man McGee knew that he had some players on his team who would show up consistently. He just had to find a way to get the entire team to play consistently going forward. But now heading into a much tougher part of their schedule, the chances of that seemed like they were about to be unlikely, as now the Falcons were heading back on the road to face off against another team in Texas, the Houston Cougars. Now early on in this one, Rocky and his number one receiver are getting things started immediately, as Sahir Gomez hauls in a reception over the top, and there's nobody who's going to catch him on his way across the goal line for a touchdown. He comes up with a big play to give the Falcons the early 7-0 lead, and after holding Houston to a 3rd down and 11, Black Man McGee was sad to see that his team not only gave up the first down, but soon this receiver had finagled his way all the way downfield for a touchdown. So Houston was making it pretty clear that it was not going to be an easy game. And it became even more clear on offense after Rocky goes out there and throws a pick, where it turned out to be another play that got returned all the way back to the crib for a touchdown, now giving Houston the 14-7 lead. And this Fitchburg offense was hoping that it would bounce back, but now Rocky throws another pick. But you see, one thing about Black Man McGee is that he is not about to give up on his quarterback, because down by 14, he knows that he is capable of making a big play. And on this one, he is able to, as he connects downfield with Jeremy Alec for a huge play, eventually getting the Falcons across the goal line for a touchdown to bring them back in this game. But if they were going to find a way to complete this comeback, it would have to be more than just on offense. So on this 3rd and 5, senior linebacker Derek Pratt dropped back in the coverage and said, "Wang!" coming up with the pick that was giving the Falcons in enemy territory, and now it feels like all the momentum has just swung to Fitchburg's side, because soon they got right down to the goal line where Rocky went out and threw a touchdown, scoring some points that was now giving the Falcons the lead. Eventually leading to the 3rd quarter, where on this 3rd down and 6, a Houston receiver does pick up a first down, but he ends up getting stripped, and senior linebacker Derek Pratt once again makes a play by recovering the fumble, giving the ball back to the Falcons, where they eventually had a chance to get another touchdown. Unfortunately, it seems like the stadium was just too loud as this offense gets called for a false start, ultimately leading to a 3rd down and long, where it looks like Fitchburg would have to settle for a field goal, but Rocky does not give up on his play. Instead, he uses his legs to extend it and finds Sahir Gomez in the end zone, coming up with a score that not only extended the Falcons' lead with under 2 minutes left, but does enough to give Fitchburg another win on their season, as Fitchburg State would go on to close this game out 38-28, and it was largely led by their star receiver Sahir Gomez. A big game from him, as he damn near went for 150 yards receiving. But shout out to Derek Pratt, who also came up with a bunch of big plays as well. Now the Falcons would ride this wave into the next game at home, where they would face off against Arkansas State, and eventually they would find themselves tied at 10-10 going into the 4th quarter. And on a play where Rocky was actually out of the game due to an injury, the backup quarterback went out there and decided to throw a dime downfield, hitting Matt McTire in stride as he ended up crossing over the goal line for a touchdown, doing enough to not only take the lead for the Falcons, but finally go on to put them above 500 on this season, as it had been the first time in over 10 years that this team had been above 500 past week 1. But in a season where they had played relatively easy opponents throughout the year, well, they would have one more light matchup before they would play some big dog. But for now, the Falcons had to lock in and get ready to face off against one of the worst teams in the country, Kent State. With the Falcons now being a team that was sitting above 500 on the season, them boys was out there moving different, as Derek Pratt comes up with a pick early on in this game to give the team a bunch of momentum. And now tied up at 10 in the 4th quarter, it looks like they were about to capitalize on it, before Marchant Daly throws a pick. And I don't know who the hell this guy thinks he is, but somehow he takes it all the way back to the crib for a touchdown. So here in the 4th quarter, it was not looking good for the Falcons. But when they got back out on offense, Rocky was looking to make up for it by throwing a dime over the top, hitting his receiver in stride as he scores a touchdown to tie this game up, ultimately now bringing it to late in the 4th quarter with less than a minute left. Where on this play, the pass would fall incomplete, but there was a flag thrown. And it turns out that it was actually called pass interference on the defense, which basically would allow Fitchburg to trot their kicker out there and kick a last-second field goal to win the game. And this win would turn out to be a huge one for multiple reasons, but mostly because the team will be solidified at least a 500 record by the time the season ends. And that's an incredible accomplishment when you think about the fact that the previous season, they only managed to win 2 games. And at this point, Black Man McGee already feels like he has had a successful season. but he is still trying to accomplish his goal by getting his team above 500 by the end of the year. But in order to do that, they're going to have to win one of their next 2 games. And he was really hoping to be their next one against the top 5 opponent, UMass Dartmouth. Now early on in this game, Fitchburg State had Derek Prack drop back in the coverage to say, "Give me that," coming up with a pick early on the road that would surprisingly set the tone for his team going forward, as this Fitchburg offense not only got downfield but got their quarterback across the goal line for a touchdown, allowing them to take the lead early on against the top 5 ranked opponent. Unfortunately though, they would be quickly reminded that they are indeed facing a top 5 ranked opponent, as UMass's running back just takes a huge pile of bear feces all over this defense. And by the second half, it looked like UMass had officially taken the momentum back, as they not only had the lead, but they were coming up with some big stops in the backfield, leading to this 3rd down and 17 where Rocky would find Matt McTire up the seam. A huge play with their backs against the wall that ties this game up at now 21. Soon though, later in the 3rd quarter though, Rocky was out there trying to make a play with his legs before he would fumble the ball and give it away to UMass Dartmouth, ultimately putting them in a situation where they were now down by 10 points in the 4th quarter. And Rocky was out there really trying to come up with a big play downfield, but unfortunately UMass seemed like they were just too much. Now once again bringing them to a 4th down where the game was on the line, and Rocky was somehow able to find a man over the top, connecting with a receiver downfield who was somehow able to bring the team down to the 1-yard line, where a few plays later Rocky would just take it up the middle himself for a touchdown to bring them back in this game. And it turns out they would actually do more than that, as they would eventually take the lead. And all of a sudden, with this defense strapping up like 2 women who hate men, the Falcons were in real good position to come away with the win if they could just come up with the stop. And that's why the entire sideline erupted when somebody said, "Wang!" as the defense forces a turnover late in this game. And just like that, the Fitchburg Falcons have taken down a top 5 ranked team, closing this game out 35-1. But the craziest thing about this is that somehow this team was able to do this at the highest level. And oftentimes they were actually making it harder for themselves as well. But for the first time all season, senior quarterback Rocky Marchitelli wins Player of the Week. And this kind of had Black Man McGee the 11th realize that he needs to start looking for a new quarterback for next year. He didn't do a whole lot of recruiting on quarterbacks quite yet, but he did find one 3-star guy out of Dallas. Now he gave him a scholarship because he's seen his game film, but it was kind of crazy to find out just how fast and how much throw power this kid actually had. And he knew that if he can get this kid here for at least 3 years, he would definitely help bring this team to heights that they've never been before. But now at this point, man, the Falcons are a top 50 ranked team, and there ain't even nobody on the team that wants to transfer anymore. Black Man McGee the 11th got a lot of people wanting to be a part of the program, and it turns out that they are already starting to get some 3-star recruits. But he knows that there will be time later to focus on next year. For now, Black Man McGee the 11th is leading his team into the last game of the regular season, where they will be facing off against one of their biggest rivals, Framingham State University. Now early on in this game, against another top 10 ranked opponent. Unlike the last game, it was very clear all throughout that they were definitely playing against the top 10 ranked opponent, because not only were they giving up scores, but they were barely able to move the ball at all. While on the other hand, it seemed like Framingham State was just moving the ball at will. They picked up multiple first downs early on in this game, and by the end of the first quarter, it looked like they were about to go up by 14 already. Eventually, they would even find themselves up by 17. Where on this 4th down, Rocky would do a great job hitting his receiver for a first down, bringing them to a 1st and goal where he also hit Matt McTire for a touchdown. And the Falcons were hoping this would be a score that would ultimately bring them back in this game. But by the second half, they realized that really no matter what they were trying to do to Framingham, unfortunately their offense was seemingly unstoppable. And a score that put them up by 3 possessions was now doing enough to put an end to the regular season, as Fitchburg State would get blown out in the last game of the year 41-7. And this was definitely a game where the Falcons got dominated in every phase of the game. But after a successful regular season where they would ultimately finish above 500, all this did was just motivate Black Man McGee the 11th to figure out more things to work on going for the next year. But in a year where he had playmakers all over this team, man, he knows that he is very proud. There are some guys who have a very bright future for the Falcons. But the worst part about the regular season ending was finding out that that was actually the last game of this season, as despite having a winning record, the Fitchburg Falcons actually did not get a bowl game, which a lot of people thought was really wild considering that there were worse teams with a bowl game. But if anything, this just now motivated Black Man McGee the 11th more going into the offseason. He had to say goodbye to a lot of players, some of which who were really good for the team this year. But after sitting back and spending a lot of time putting in a bunch of work on the recruiting, Black Man McGee the 11th was able to pull some pretty decent recruits. Some of the most high-value recruits that this program has seen in over 10 years. There were now actually big names that preferred to go to this small-level school and help build them back into a powerhouse, including the #1 player on Black Man McGee's board, Rodney Luwani. who has a great chance to step in and be the face of the program immediately. But that will have to wait for next season. And if you want to see part 2 of the Fitchburg State University rebuild, be sure to get this video to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. Also, be sure to comment down below what else you guys want to see next, and YouTube thinks you'll like one of these other stories until the next one comes out. If you got to this point in the video, just know that I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. I hope you all have an incredible weekend, and other than that, I'm going to catch you guys next time.